giant robots smashing into other giant robots.
This is the Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots podcast. I'm your host, Chad Pytel. Joining me today is Luis Gutierrez, Director of AI at Constant Contact. Luis, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Chad.
So Constant Contact has been around for a really long time and has a significant presence and offering for the business community. You just joined about 10 months ago, is my understanding, as director of AI. What surprised you most when you joined Constant Contact?
Oh, wow. So many things surprised me. So probably initially, what surprised me was how much the company was willing to adopt AI. I came from fintech before that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was in fintech, since it's a very high risk space. You're talking about somebody's money. I think the CTO used to always say, when you're building these models and you push them into production, think about your bank account. Do you want your bank account? Would you trust your bank account with this model? And so before you push anything into production. And so we were, very much about how do we minimize the risk associated with it, which led us to sometimes being too conservative. I think when I came to Constant Contact, there was a culture of adopting new technologies, of understanding that AI needs to be approached in a clear-eyed way. But at the same time, if we keep our heads in the sand and we play it too conservatively, then we're gonna miss out on all of the amazing things and all the amazing benefits that we can provide through digital marketing tools we can provide to our customers. So that's probably the most salient thing that was this willingness to say, where I had all of these ideas and everybody was like, wow, yeah, let's see where these ideas go. Yeah, and from a customer perspective, the thing that struck me most interestingly is how customers were willing to take small prompts. So, right, this is probably the most interesting thing. Small prompts, and then try to produce some sort of content, multi-channel content from it. And so, from our perspective, it was an interesting learning, because then what we needed to do is we needed to take additional information. We needed to learn about our customers so that they could continue this idea of taking a very, very small prompt, saying like, I'm going to release a new pistachio flavored for my ice cream shop in Austin. And then taking all that we can do to learn about them, whether that's scraping information from their websites, understanding their campaign history, understanding more about them, and then using that to create context around creating content for them. And then I think probably the most counterintuitive thing that I learned was, growing up in an age where, email was really, really important when I was younger. And then as I got older, became less important, at least perceptually for me.
Yeah.
And then coming into Constant Contact, and I realized, looking at getting a real good understanding of marketing in the US and around the world, I understand that email is still the most important by far.
Yeah.
Like the most important channel, like putting aside everything else, social media, Facebook, TikTok, whatever the case is, still vast majority of people rely on email. And it makes sense, right? Because that's where you have a personal connection. When you have this list of customers, right? Your email addresses of customers, that's a personal thing where it's very different from broadcasting out, in X or in TikTok or something.
Additionally, I think there's been sort of a renaissance of even non-commercial, well, somewhat in the gray area of like newsletters and that kind of thing in email. And I think the bifurcation, the splitting of social media has really hurt the ability to reach people. And email is still a really great way to create that connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the problems that a lot of companies I talk to face is that there is so much potential for AI in products, that a lot of different people at their companies have different ideas for features that could be added, things that could be done. Just sort of sorting through all of those ideas and figuring out what you should actually do, and let alone executing on it, is sometimes a challenge for people. So how did you approach that? Joining
Yeah.
Constant Contact and figuring out what to do.
Yeah, I would even throw in there a couple of other problems. There's a lot of hype.
Yeah.
Right. You can read articles, blog posts, listen to different podcasts, and then maybe not get entirely the picture and understand, well, AI can do this. And even to another, to a further extent, you can go into ChatGPT and do something and understand that ChatGPT is an ecosystem of models, right? It's not just a single model that has tools and, some of the best engineers in the world, building an infrastructure behind it. And then so if something works in ChatGPT, then a lot of times people can come to you and say, well, why can't we just do this right now?
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good point. Not to take too big of a tangent, but whatever, we can.
Yeah, of course.
That's getting more and more of a problem because ChatGPT, the web UI that people use, is a product in and of itself that now has features that actually aren't necessarily accessible via the APIs that developers can use. Or if they are, they're in separate pieces, and the web UI for ChatGPT is bringing them together. It's not just the model selection. We did a live stream on our other video show where I live code and do explorations of stuff with ChatGPT Agent, which brings together the research model, computer use in a virtual machine, which was Operator. That's not accessible via ChatGPT API, OpenAI APIs yet.
Right.
And so it was working to accomplish the task that we wanted, but it was all by manual prompts. If we wanted to script that and do it at scale and that kind of thing, that's not currently possible.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And even to further complicate it, somebody could get something to run locally on their machine and it looks great and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
But then that leap to scaling it into production, making sure that it's tested, making sure that it's responsible, right? And that all of the things that need to happen when you're pushing things into production environment becomes much more complicated, right?
Yeah. You solved it, right? You tackled all those challenges and
we've
figured out what to do.
Solved everything. Yeah. No, I think the first thing that we did is essentially, this is what I would recommend to any small business that is thinking about strategically adopting an AI program in their company, is whether you're 5 people or you're 5,000 people, is have a committee, a cross-functional committee, an AI governance and strategy committee. And start off, have legal, IT, security, AI engineering, all as part of that committee, and understand what do we want to do, even before we say this is what we want to do with AI. But how far are we willing to go with AI? Because the fundamental thing that needs to be a part of every decision for AI is that these are probabilistic models. Which means that they're going to be wrong. That means you're inherently accepting error, right? So understand what is my appetite for error? What is our policy on data security, information security? What is our policy on ethical, responsible use of AI, and so forth? So once you get to that point and you set the ground rules, you put the guardrails around it. That's the first step. The second step is coming to us, and then what we had another complicated issue as well, which is that a lot of teams were just doing things in different infrastructures, right? And so then when they would break or when they needed to be improved, then it became really tough for my team to go and support those. So then the next thing we did is we got together with the AI governance team and other representatives and said, like, we need to put down a strategy. We need to have an actual cohesive vision, and that cohesive vision needs to outline technologies as well, right? We were using Fast API and LangChain, right, as some of our AR workflows and so forth. So putting down some technical specifications on that. So trying to get everybody behind that, and then making sure that if you're going to develop with the product team as well, product needs to be involved in this. If you're doing something internal, then we need to scale. We need to talk to IT, security, and some other companies to make sure we're not incorporating data sources that could be risky or could violate terms with our customers and end users. So I think having an overall AI strategy and the way that we did it is a natural line started to emerge. So we had a lot of projects. Probably when I started, maybe 70 to 80% of our projects were just, we have some context, we have data and context about the user, and then we have an ChatGPT API, OpenAI, that we're going to send this context over and we're going to get something. So we're going to build a pipeline around that. And then there was the remaining projects where we're going to fine tune models, we're going to train models, right? And so then we actually started to structure our teams around that. So we have a team, and we called it the passive team. So passive AI, which is essentially just taking context, building a pipeline, sending it over to a third-party vendor, and then getting it back and then contextualizing it for the user, putting it into our UI. And then the other teams that were just mostly focused were more like applied research, where we're training models from scratch, or we're fine-tuning models, which is just picking a layer in the model and updating the parameters in particular layers so that it's not as expensive and not as lengthy. And then once we started to solidify those teams, then things started to become a lot easier. Essentially, when projects would come up that would just require sending context over, we had a team that was an expert at it, and then they started to grow more, and then support other teams that were building those, and started to govern that structure and the technologies around that. And then most of the time, training models and fine-tuning models is pretty technical. So really, it was kind of siloed in a team that we have right now. Then a couple of other teams started to emerge off of that as well. An infrastructure team. So we have an AI infrastructure team, because essentially all of these teams becomes really, really difficult when you put deployment and supporting of infrastructure on the actual developers, right? One is that they're not necessarily have the background for that, to do a lot of DevOps work and AI ops work. But secondly, they're not interested in that as well, right? We want to make sure that we're challenging our team and that they feel excited about coming to work. So then we started to develop an AI infrastructure team that supports both the passive and the active teams.
Are you self-hosting any models at Constant Contact yet?
Yeah, we do. We have a Spaminator spam detection model that we're self-hosting, which helps us with deliverability, which is essentially looking for bad emails to make sure that people aren't sending out spam, using our tool to send out spam. And right now we have 97, 98% deliverability rate with that model. On the research side, we are working to fine tune different contextual models and LLMs as well. Like we haven't gotten to a point where we're releasing any of those models yet, but hopefully you can have me back in 2 to 3 months, and I can tell you all about those as well.
Speaking more generally, what are the kinds of problems where you're finding that you do need to fine tune or train versus this third-party model is good enough?
Yeah, that's a really great question.
Because I'm finding the line is shifting. Where that is shifting. Like, a year or two ago, we would have talked a lot more about needing to fine tune or train something than we do now.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So you'll probably meet people who are, on both sides of that argument. I'll come out and say that I'm biased and I'm on the fine tuning. Having started out, I did my PhD in computer science, focused in machine learning AI back in 2009, 2010. Right. So I've been involved in this industry for a really long time. So there's part of it. There's part of me that always understands this field when it was very early on.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's kind of like I live in San Antonio, and people are always like, "Wow, that's great! Such a great tourist destination." I was like, "Not really. It's kind of boring, right?" So you can never really see the city that you grew up in as like this great in the way that, in the eyes of like other people, outsiders who come in. And so there's that perspective of me as well, that bias that I recognize for AI and machine learning. But I'll say this: you're right. Like as context windows get bigger, you can send more context over, right? And then that'll give you more defined results, more tailored results, right? I think where fine tuning really plays a huge role, especially for companies like Constant Contact, that have decades of experience and decades of data is probably the most interesting thing, right? Is that you're able to take data that essentially nobody else in the world has, right? So this is proprietary data that we've observed over our customers for decades and decades, and as a byproduct of that, we've been able to see like what works and what doesn't work. We've been able to measure different things, whether that's you want to grow your contact list, you want to increase open rates, or whatever the case is, right? So we can tailor and we can prune data sets that are optimized on particular metrics. And then we can squeeze out a little bit of performance in a way that you couldn't get necessarily through context. I think like the other issue that comes up here too, right, is that when you start to, if we were to fine tune open source models, as opposed to sending over context to a third party vendor, like as you know, it becomes really, really expensive. Like you're a victim of your own success sometimes with AI, right? If you're using third party vendors. Like as the number of calls, the number of tokens generated grows and grows and grows, as usage grows, adoption grows, so does your bill at the end of the month, right? Or at the end of the year. So one of the things that fine tuning also allows you to do is you can take a powerful open source model, right, that is good on its own. You can fine tune it, and in some cases, you can even make it smaller, right? You can internally host it, and it can become faster, better, cheaper, more performance. The performance sometimes, it depends on what you're measuring, right? Like as you know, like the position that I hold is models are inherently not good or bad. You just optimize them on particular metrics, right? So in some cases, you could make it better at something by trading off performance on something else. And so at Constant Contact, that becomes an easy decision for us because sure, ChatGPT can generate marketing copy, and it can also write a term paper on World War II, and it can generate code. But we actually don't need term papers for World War II and code, right?
Right.
We just need this. So if you can squeeze out a little bit of performance on the fine tuning, make it smaller, make it more performant, decrease latency, make it cheaper, then you start to see a bunch of different metrics moves on our end. But that said, it's a continuum for us, right? Most of our projects start off with, let's send over a bunch of context. Let's use the biggest model that we can, see if like this idea makes sense. Right. Let's run it against customers and get some data. And then, the evolution of it is like, can we host this model internally by training some of our internal data into the model?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great strategy, especially because, like you said, there's a lot of hype and possibility, and you don't even know. You might build something and it might not be actually valuable to people, or they might not use it, or those kind of things. So figuring that out, what is the, for small businesses, for users of Constant Contact, what has been the most valuable area of product improvements that involve AI?
Yeah, I think for one, the longstanding deliverability is right is
Mm-hmm.
one that we need to mention. But on that, probably like the biggest the thing that's moved the needle the most has been personalization infrastructure on our back end. Is what what I mentioned earlier, is that we're allowing users to come in and write one sentence or less on
Mm-hmm.
what they want their newsletter to be about, what they want their campaign to be about, what they want their social media posts to be on. And then we're able to take that and then mix in other data that we understand about the user and then generate some email campaign or newsletter or something to that effect.
On an individual recipient basis?
No, on a customer basis,
Okay,
right?
on the
On a customer
customer
basis. On
basis.
the
But I
individual
could
recipient.
envision a world in the future where it actually is happening on an individual recipient basis too.
Absolutely, right. So I can't talk too much about some of the features that we're
Yeah.
developing internally right now, but that's high priority for us as well. Is like how do we allow how do we create segmentations per user per their contact list, right? And so it's
Mhm.
easy to do like at a higher level, and we do that. We have tools internally where you can segment based on, for example, open rate. So you can break
Right.
up into quantiles and deciles and so forth, right? So we have that tool availability right now.
Mhm.
So, but what we want to do is we want to go beyond that and start to understand, like, well, forecasting, like who's forecasted to be the most open rate and so forth, right? So those are all things that are really interesting that we would like to get into, and that we're currently researching right now, and it's a high priority for us.
I think the idea is, as a business owner, I don't know how to write the best email,
Hmm.
right? And so what was happening before was I might have a small shop or be a small business, and I'm writing a bad email and I'm spending a lot of time doing it.
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily working with experts to craft
Mhm.
the best email. And so that's why I think features like this, I don't react as negatively to them as like, oh, a novelist using it to write a book, right? Because it's like, you're sort of taking the creativity out of the art.
Mhm.
This is applying an area where Constant Contact has expertise in terms of how to create great emails that
Mhm.
perform well and putting it in the hands of business owners.
Yeah, agreed 100%. I think most small businesses probably, like you said, don't have this expertise in writing emails. They don't know how to craft the perfect email. And so, in a sense, like AI is turning Constant Contact into your own personal marketing firm, right?
Mm-hmm.
By being able to craft emails, show you different drafts, look at them, templates, email templates, newsletters, and so forth. So I agree with you, and yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I think when AI starts writing novels and songs and movies, then I think that there's going to be something that's detached from creativity on
Right.
that end. Whereas like with our small businesses, if someone's has a bakery, their creativity is manifesting in the products that they're producing,
Mm-hmm.
and this other stuff is more things that could be delegated away,
Yeah.
because so they can focus on baking the best pastries, in all of Austin.
I think this is touching up against one area that you already mentioned, which is how do we use AI ethically in our product? What are the boundaries that we're willing to do? So, as you brought together that committee, and actually at Thoughtbot we did the same thing. We had a cross-functional group of people at Thoughtbot. We weren't sure what that was going to manifest in at first, but what it eventually that group decided was to write a ethics guide. So, like when you're thinking about a feature or a product, whatever, a series of questions that you can ask yourself about what it's doing and how it's doing it. What did you arrive at Constant Contact as the boundaries?
Yeah, this is a really great question. One that I've thought about a lot, especially when I was at a fintech before. We
Mhm.
were, developing models for underwriting loans, fraud detection. And the thing that's missing here is there's no compliance or governance issued of this is what ethical AI is, right?
Right.
And so then largely it's left to companies and developers and individuals to decide, what is ethical for us. And I think at Constant Contact, we're really lucky. Is we're a company of people who care about the customer, right? We're a company of people who themselves have small businesses. Like a large majority of the people I work with have small businesses themselves, are connected to their communities, right? So everything that we do at Constant Contact starts with how do we enable the customer to grow their business and do the thing that they love. And so from the AI governance committee, we start at that point. And then we build around that. And we understand, one is that we understand like how are we protecting customers' data to make sure that we're not using their any PII data for training, of course. We're not sending over, we're redacting all PII, and that we're also making sure that we're not commingling data in any way, right? If you think about the inference step of a model, right? That's personal and individual to each user, right? And then one of the things that happens if a user inputs raw text, then that raw text gets translated into some sort of vectorization form, right? Some numerical form that is uninterpretable to humans. And then we don't store that raw text. We don't store that even if we have a third-party vendor. We opt not to store that. And also, like for any of our internal models as well, we don't store that.
So you're only storing the vector?
We store vectors in some cases, right? So it depends. Like if we're using a third-party vendor, a lot of times that goes over to the third-party vendor.
Yeah.
And as part of our usage rules, they don't store. So some companies like OpenAI can store raw text for the purpose of identifying toxic information, right? But we've opted not to store that at all. So raw data is not stored. Internally, we don't store any of that raw data.
That's a really interesting boundary, if we can dig into that a little bit, because how are you then doing like auditing or quality assurance?
So quality assurance of the sense in like whether we're measuring toxicity or anything in that?
Yeah, or if someone reports, I got this really weird result, or how do you make sure that the product is doing what you intended?
Got it. Yeah. So in terms of like measurement, right? Yeah. So we have several methods, right? So one is like LLM as a judge, could be one. So we sample out our data, and then have several LLM as a judge models that are looking for toxicities, looking for measurement, right, and looking for different general errors in the data, but also just looking to make sure that the data is doing what it's supposed to do. So the way that we approach actual quality, right, is we do it at 3 different points. So obviously, like early on, like during the prototyping phase, we have validation data sets that we can test to make sure that we reach a certain level of accuracy, precision recall on it. Then during the actual model development, we use different types of, so it depends on which kind of model you're talking about. But again, like for vector-based, like word embeddings, you can use something like a BERT similarity score, a Rouge score, right, to look to see how similar the results are to our validation set. And then at that point, you can get some sort of score that measures the quality of it, whether that's perplexity score, BERT similarity score, Rouge score, Meteor score, right, to understand how similar is the result of the model to our validation set, right, to our test set, right? So there's ways to do that as well. And then again, like in production, we do analysis, obviously, right, like in the same way, to monitor drift, to make sure that the data that's coming in, right? So we have and our test set that those distributions don't deviate too much, right? So we have our test set that we validated when we were developing the model, and now we have the actual real world data that's coming in, and then we can do a distribution comparison of those two. And if those distributions, mathematically get too far apart, then we can start to say something weird's happening. We should take a look. We should retrain the model. We should look deeper into it. And then we also have LLM as a judge, right? We have several LLM as a judge models in there as well.
That's great. It's a little technical, but I think that's really valuable advice for how to assure and evaluate quality without violating user privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I can throw in there that might be even more technical, but I'll try to. But is adoption, right? So adoption is a proxy for quality, right? They're not always correlated one-to-one, but generally they're linearly correlated.
Right.
And so then if we introduce a model into a user's journey and then they send off a campaign, then we can attribute some kind of like the model played some role in that. So then what we can do is we could set things up almost like a big regression problem, right? Where we have 10 things that might be influencing the user journey, and then we can attribute some sort of partial adoption to our model. And then we can create some statistical analysis around that as well. So that's something that we're currently experimenting with right now. And we have some pretty good initial findings on that. But linking adoption, right? Or linking it to downstream metrics, like the number of campaigns you sent,
right.
Could be another useful way to measuring
at the very least, you don't want that to go down, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
This is actually a good point because what you're talking about there in terms of measuring usage and that kind of thing is very valid even outside of the context of integrating AI into your product. Like if as someone creating a product, you should be measuring who's using it, how often, is it moving in the direction that you want it to?
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have other user. We do user testing as well, where we interview users. You're absolutely right. Like I think the interesting thing about AI and machine learning is that you can do, as a developer, you can do everything 100% correct. And then the model just doesn't generalize to the real world. And it's not your fault, but it's just, this is the way the world is, right? You can't control all of the external confounders that a user may interact with. And so, that's an important thing too, is that we need to maintain this tether to reality and to the product and to measurement, right? To the downstream metrics, to the company's high-level OKRs with models. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest changes too that Constant Contact has inspired in me as well. I think even 2 years ago, I was the type of person that was over technical, as you can probably guess, and then would kind of always break down model performance to some sort of underlying component in the model, or something in some sort of uniqueness about the data set, and try to connect those. And I think that the thing that's really become clear to me, working with small businesses and working with people at Constant Contact who are experts in marketing and not necessarily experts in machine learning, is that AI provides a meaningful experience, right? That meaningful experience can manifest itself in impacting downstream metrics, or just somebody can go there that has writer's block, interacts with the AI, and even if they don't use the prompt, it was beneficial in that journey, right? Because it kind of got them over a hump. And we can't really dismiss those effects and try to be too over technical with it. And that just understanding that AI did play a role in that journey, and it somehow led to accomplishing whatever the customer's goal was, I think is something really, really important. That's difficult to measure, of course, but something that we need to continue to keep in mind as we're developing these models.
Yeah. Were there other things that jumped out or that became sort of stakes in the ground for you on the ethical side of things?
Yeah, for sure. On our end, one of the stakes in the grounds, or the things that were really clear for us, was just in the internal side, right? So um, from internally, I think one of the issues is like every company deals with this idea of there's a shadow kind of AI ecosystem, right? Like where people are using their own personal tools to do things. And so this was a problem to every degree, I think, at every company, and Constant Contact, is no exception to that. And so one of the things that we did on that end is we wanted to make sure that we were only using approved tools, right? And so, one of the mistakes that I made early on was basically saying, okay, here's the dictation on my end. No tool, only tools that are allowed by Constant Contact approved on this list, right? And I think that what it did, it caused the usage of those tools to go into the shadows even more. And so starting to look at it from my perspective as a problem of addition rather than subtraction was like the real key to really getting buy-in from the company. So starting to look at, we can't, no company in the world can afford every tool out there, that, the long tail of AI tools. So what we started to do is we started to think about, instead of trying to support the long tail of AI tools and get them through security, through IT, through compliance, why don't we start looking at bigger tools that can do lots and lots of things, and then focusing on education of these bigger tools. So for example, we're Google Shop at Constant Contact. So there's a lot of Google AI tools that are really useful. And so when people would come in and say, we want to use Read AI, or we want to use one of these other meeting notes, we'd say, that's great. Keep that in mind. You can submit a request for us to review that. But let me show you Google, Gemini's note taking. And most of the time, people were like, well, that's pretty cool. I didn't know it could do that. And so we started to notice that having bi-weekly lunch and learn sessions to educate people on the tools that we actually have, and adopting tools that could do a larger distribution of different tasks was our strategy internally. And I think to a certain extent that allows us to monitor these tools. And then again, like it leads up to that ethical, responsible use, right? When tools are operating, in the shadows, people, and then there might be some sort of, issue that comes up, people are going to be less likely to come to IT, come to security, come to me, right? To say like, oh, I think something may have happened here. Whereas like if they're using approved tools, then they're going to be more likely, and then we can handle these issues more effectively.
Yeah. It occurred to me, was the director of AI position a new one that you came into?
Yeah, I would like to think that Constant Contact actually started to exist the day after I was hired. But as far as I know, like this was a new role for us. Yeah.
And the fact that you are responsible for both product and internal AI, bringing sort of all that together into one area of responsibility. One, it's a lot probably, but I think it's really smart from a company perspective to do that.
Yeah. So first, I have a lot of help too.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Like this is something initially I was brought on like more for the product side, but then like you said, things started to coalesce, and these natural lines started to evolve. It's kind of what I tell everybody on my team. Before you do a model, like do some data analysis, and I bet you the answer is going to jump out at you if you spend 2 hours just doing some data analysis. And it's the same thing here. Like once we started to look at both, just doing some analysis on the product side and the productivity side, then we started to say like, an overall cohesive AI strategy like makes sense here, right? So that everybody's under the same, has the same ideas and the same goals. So from our end, it makes a ton of sense. And like our approach is the same at a high level, is that we want to approach AI in a clear-eyed and deliberate way that brings value to the end user, whether that end user is internal or that end user is external. And so we want to do that in a way that's cost effective and that is measurable, right? So that's basically, we started with that one point on both sides, and that's agnostic on the product or the productivity side. And then from there, we just started to build on it. And so we do have like a really great ecosystem of tools. Like most recently, we've adopted Cursor, like as our coding assistant tool. And I'm kind of old, and I'm one of those old guys that's just like, I could just code stuff myself. But I've recently been in some interviews, and I've seen some young people who have basically just, learned to code on some of these coding tools, and they're just amazing. They're able to synthesize multiple streams of information and then produce like working code. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
So were you previously mandating an editor at Constant Contact?
No, we had several like IDEs before Constant Contact. Like on my team, we used PyCharm, and then I think there is a couple of other editors like on the different engineering and dev teams.
So when you say you adopted Cursor, do you mean that you mandated everyone use Cursor?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, but we've adopted it. By adopted, essentially we've invested in a number of licenses that allows pretty much anybody that wants to use it to use it, and we would probably say we have a plurality of people using it.
Yeah. That's fine. I do know companies that have mandated editors even before Cursor or anything like that. Thoughtbot is not one of those companies, and I think it would start a riot if we tried to force everyone to use the same editor.
Yeah, for sure. For one person that would probably be at the head of the riot at Constant Contact would be me. Like, I don't want to use it just because I feel that. I think it's just old habits die hard, right?
Yeah.
I think it works okay for me. Like if I want to generate some quick things, but for me, my brain just, my brain goes back to undergrad, like intro to programming. Like I started to build solutions in a way that work in programming languages that make it tough for me to chat with, anybody else, especially in AI. Yeah.
I need Vim key bindings in any editor that I use. So it's a good thing that both Visual Studio Code and Cursor support Vim key bindings.
Right. It's Cursor's like a fork, right?
It is. It's basically, I don't know if it's a complete fork or whether they keep it up to date off of like the Visual Studio core thing. But
yeah. So we definitely like seen a lot of usage here. An interesting experiment, and hopefully the person that's the subject of this experiment doesn't listen or think or doesn't interpret this the wrong way. But we recently tried an experiment where we took a designer who didn't have any coding background and said, here's a Cursor license and here's access to some repos, enough that you can't do any damage, but enough to where you can build some projects. And it was the results were really interesting because the idea actually here is, can we get designers to be able to prototype stuff on their own? And there are tools, like we do employ a couple of other tools like Flowise to prototype like AI workflows. But obviously, building the code allows us to be able to look at it, and then we can hand it over and then be able to deploy it more easily, hopefully. And so we did give it to a designer, and there was some interesting results for just prototyping things from scratch. But just the concept of connecting everything together, right?
Yeah.
GitHub, like everything, CI/CD, everything that just comes in with like when you're actually developing code, just becomes really complicated. You can easily hit a blocker that is unsolvable for someone that doesn't have a background in coding. So I really believe that, what is it that Andrew Karpathy from OpenAI said, that software 3.0 is human language, right? Is English, right? That at some point we are going to be able to say things and we're going to be able to deploy things into. I just don't think we're there yet, right? I think we still need that expertise because like making all the pieces fit together, even if you were to get it to produce good code, which, is hit and miss sometimes, like just putting all the pieces together is the really tough part. And so from our end, like mostly, it's, we use it for, more as a coding assistant rather than vibe coding. What I've been able to see.
Totally. That me personally and Thoughtbot overall are in that same boat. And that's one of the areas where we want to keep on learning and pushing the boundaries, though. It evolves so much, but also you can develop tools and techniques that make it work even better. And the only way to do that is by trying, experimenting, learning, and saying, what's the new state of the art now?
Yeah. One of the best way to think about almost all of AI is it's a tool. And, if you're building a house, you use your hammer when you need the hammer and you put it aside when you don't need it, right? So I think thinking about all of these tools in that way is pretty fundamental to how we approach problems here at Constant Contact.
Well, on that note, I think that's a great place to stop for today. Thank you so much for stopping by, Luis, and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
If folks want to get in touch with you or follow along with you, where are the places that they can do that?
Well, first thing that I would do to encourage all of your users, go to Constant Contact and start a trial, right? That's probably the best way to understand more about Constant Contact and about the work that we're doing at Constant Contact. But if people want to get in touch with me, just send an invitation on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with you, answer any questions, answer any messages.
Awesome. Well, both Constant Contact and Luis' LinkedIn will be linked in the show notes for this episode, which you can find on the video and at giantrobots.fm. This podcast is brought to you by Thoughtbot. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.